Sara stood by the window of her high-rise apartment, looking out at the sprawling city below. She loved the view, the way the sun glinted off the skyscrapers like diamonds glimmering in the sky. But today her mind was elsewhere. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, interrupting her thoughts. She glanced at it and saw a message from James, her neighbor upstairs. She paused. Sara wasn't the most sociable person. She had been living in this building for nearly a year, and while she exchanged pleasantries with James, she didn't know him well. She felt a knot in her stomach. Why didn't he just use the regular stairs? She typed back quickly, "Sorry, can't let anyone use it today." After hitting send, she felt a wave of relief wash over her, but deep down she also felt a twinge of guilt. Was she just being unfriendly? She shook her head. This was her space, and she didn't owe anyone favors. As the day went on, Sara tried to focus on her work. She was a graphic designer, and deadlines loomed like storm clouds in her mind. Every time she looked up from her screen, her eyes wandered to the view outside. She noticed how the clouds rolled in, casting shadows over the glittering buildings. It mirrored her mood, dark and restless. Later that night, she couldn't shake off a strange feeling. The memory of James lingered in her mind. Maybe she should have been kinder. Maybe that little lift ride would have been easier for him. With a sigh, she pushed the thoughts aside and focused more on her project. Days turned into weeks, and life in the building continued. Sara had met some great people, always smiling and exchanging pleasantries, but James remained a quiet figure, just with a friendly wave whenever they crossed paths in the hall. One evening, she came home from work feeling exhausted. As she entered the elevator, she was surprised to see James already there. He had boxes piled high around him, a definite sign of packing. He said, flashing a warm smile. She responded with a polite smile, making small talk about his new place. As the elevator began to ascend, she remembered her earlier refusal. "I'm sorry about the lift." He shrugged it off. "No worries, I managed." As they finally reached their floor, he nodded a friendly goodbye. Something tugged at her heart. She felt a faint pang of regret. A few weeks later, while waiting for the elevator, a strange feeling washed over her. Right before the doors opened, she noticed a shiny clipboard on the wall next to the call buttons. Curious, she leaned in closer. It was the private lift usage log, names of residents who had access, and there it was. That moment froze her. She felt something in her chest tighten. There was so much more to him than she thought. As soon as the elevator doors opened, Sara stepped inside. She pushed the button to her floor, her mind racing. For the first time, she questioned why she felt uneasy. Why had she brushed him off so easily? The next day, she resolved to talk to him. Under the gentle glow of evening light, she found him in the common area, packing a few more boxes. "Hey," she started, a little shy. James looked up, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Oh, really?" "But it kind of is," she replied. "I mean, you have access. I shouldn't have brushed off your request." He set down the box he was holding and took a small breath. "You know, it's just how it is. Not everyone can see the whole picture." Sara felt a ping of guilt wash over her again. She noticed how he struggled to stay cheerful while packing. There was an intensity in the way he worked, like he was battling his own thoughts. That night, as she tried to sleep, she replayed their conversation. His words rolled over and over again in her head. What did he mean by seeing the whole picture? Did he know she was struggling too? The next day, she decided to do something daring. She baked a batch of cookies, something she had not done in a long time. She wanted to offer him something nice, a token of friendship, maybe an apology. After she neatly packaged them, she headed upstairs. When she reached his door, her heart raced. What if he didn't want to talk? She knocked. After a moment, the door opened, and James stood there looking surprised. "Hey, I came to bring you something," she said, holding out the small plate of cookies. His eyes lit up and the tension in his posture eased. "Wow, thank you." They exchanged a few pleasantries, and Sara marveled at how quickly he became more relaxed. It felt easy to talk to him. They sat down in the small shared area and the conversation flowed. Through their talk, she learned that James had faced some tough times. His move was not just a change in location, but a fresh start after a difficult breakup. With every word, she sensed the raw emotions beneath the surface. It touched her in ways she didn't expect. In return, Sara opened up about her own struggles in the fast-paced world of design, the pressures of work, and the loneliness that sometimes crept in. They found common ground, sharing laughs over little quirks and fears. For the first time, she felt like she could truly connect with him. As the evening continued, the weight of their shared feelings grew lighter. James shared a story about a disaster he faced with some of his designs, an absolute wreck. The way he laughed at himself made her smile. Before she left, she felt a sense of warmth blossoming inside her. "I hope we can do this again, James." He smiled back, looking relieved. "Absolutely." Over the next few weeks, their friendship blossomed. They became regulars at the coffee shop around the corner, often pulling each other's leg about failed projects and embarrassing moments. Every time they met, Sara felt lighter, like the shadows that had loomed over her heart were slowly fading. Through those conversations, she realized how important it is to look beyond the surface. Everyone carries their stories, and in learning about each other's struggles, they became more than just neighbors, they became friends. She realized how true that was. They were two people who met in an elevator and took the chance to step beyond their comforts. From that one moment of hesitance, they created a safe space for each other. As she walked back from the cafe one day, she noticed James standing outside his apartment. He was on the phone, looking a bit stressed. When he caught a glimpse of her, he waved, and that simple gesture made her heart flutter. After he ended his call, she approached him. He sighed before answering, just some work stuff. But she could see it in his eyes, the weight that still hung on him, the remnants of battles still fought. She thought of how far they had come, yet how far they both still had to go. "Hey, why don't we tackle some of that work together?" His expression softened. As they discussed ideas for their projects, Sara felt the connection growing even deeper. They were not just sharing laughter, they were sharing the challenges that came with life. There was something powerful in that bond. With each passing encounter, the city outside the window felt a little less daunting. Feelings of connection and understanding that had previously felt so distant were now at their fingertips. By the time the winter approached, the two of them decided it was time for a small gathering with friends. They invited their neighbors over for a cozy night of warmth, laughter, and cookies, a reminder of their first encounter. As they mingled with their friends, Sara caught James looking over at her with a twinkle in his eye. They exchanged knowing smiles, a silent tribute to the journey that had taken them from awkwardness to friendship. When the laughter died down and the guests had left, she found herself alone with him for a moment. She asked, her voice light. James chuckled, shaking his head. But as the laughter faded, Sara noticed the hint of seriousness back in James's eyes. His gaze was steady, filled with understanding. "We all have our battles, don't we?" The truth hung in the air between them, heavy and comforting. They both realized that everyone carries their unnoticed burdens, and taking a moment to truly see someone can change everything. As they stood together in the warmth of their newfound friendship, Sara looked out at the city below, now bathed in the glow of streetlights. It felt different, alive with possibilities. She was grateful for that moment when she first brushed off his request. If she hadn't, who knows where they would be now. What started as a simple gesture had turned into a journey of connection, friendship, and understanding. And ultimately, it taught her the beautiful power of seeing beyond the surface. The sound of the elevator doors sliding shut echoed through the hushed hallway, drowning out the distant clamor of the city outside. Sara stood there, her heart racing, her thoughts clashing like a storm. She had just brushed off his request, a motion she instantly regretted, but pride wouldn't allow her to reverse her answer. James had asked, his eyes hopeful. Sara had looked at him, the gentle edges of his face framed by a light that blurred the lines of the harsh day. She felt the tension of her own solitude weighing heavily. "Sorry, can't today." The words slipped out almost too easily, and she felt something twist inside her, like a door she had slammed shut, locking out the potential of connection. Later, as she sat at her kitchen table in her sparsely decorated apartment, surrounded by sketches and half-drunk coffee cups, guilt began to creep in. She glanced at her phone, ignoring the work messages flooding in, fixating instead on the thought of James, her quiet neighbor who had recently moved in upstairs. They'd exchanged a few pleasantries, shared a couple of awkward smiles. Yet in those minimal interactions, she felt an urge to know more about him. But in the whirlwind of her thoughts, she pushed that urge aside. She didn't owe him anything. She had her own battles to fight, the looming deadlines that hung over her like dark clouds. She shifted her focus back to her work, but her mind lingered on the moment of rejection, and a murmur of regret gnawed at her insides. Days turned to weeks. Sara would hear James in the hallway, sometimes catching him moving boxes, his footfalls echoing a little louder than her own. Each encounter filled her with a strange blend of warmth and guilt. She would look up and offer a quick smile or a nod, but the past lingered like an unresolved note in a song. Then one rainy afternoon, a curiosity gripped her. She found herself staring at the elevator buttons every time she passed by. It was easy to ignore that private lift most days, but now it loomed larger than life, reminding her of the request she turned down. Something made her pause and look closer, and that's when she noticed it, a clipboard tacked up next to the call buttons. Her heart raced as she approached it. She'd seen it before, but today was different. The names listed under the private lift usage made her lean in. Then she saw it, James's name. Bold and intentional. Realization washed over her as striking as the wind that rattled the window panes. It hit her hard this wasn't just a preference. He had access and yet had politely asked her for a favor. The knot in her stomach tightened. She had denied him help, not knowing the hidden struggles that lay beneath his polite smile. How could she have brushed him off so easily? In that moment, everything shifted. The weight of her indifference settled in, heavy like stones in her chest. She felt a rush of urgency, a need to reach out and make things right. The next day, she mustered her courage. As evening painted the walls of her apartment in soft golds and deep blues, she made a decision. She baked cookies chocolate chip, his favorite if she remembered right, something comforting, something she could offer. As she approached James's door, she could hear muffled sounds from within a mix of traffic and what she thought was music. Her heart thudded in her chest. She knocked quietly at first, almost hesitantly. After a moment, she heard footsteps, a pause, then the door creaked open, revealing James. He looked surprised, a bit disheveled, his shirt slightly rumpled. There was warmth in his eyes, though. "Hey, Sara," she held out the small plate of cookies. I thought. The corner of his mouth curled up, and for the first time she noticed how genuine that smile was. Wow, thank you. He took the cookies, his eyes brightening. I know, she said, raising her eyebrows slightly, but I feel bad about how I brushed off your request about the lift. His smile faltered for just a moment, letting a wave of vulnerability leak through. It's okay, I understand, not everyone wants to help, and I get it. And just like that, the door had cracked ever so slightly, creating a space for honesty. They moved to the small common area, which was littered with boxes and a half-assembled bookshelf. Sara found herself relaxing in his presence, the room filled with a warmth that felt inviting. They began to talk, hesitantly at first, but then with growing enthusiasm. Slowly, they swapped stories, laughter echoing off strained walls. James told her about why he moved, about how life had pushed him away from everything familiar to go after something new. He had once been a designer too, but faced setbacks that made him question everything. In response, Sara opened up about her own journey in the chaotic world of design, the pressures of meeting deadlines and the artist's struggle against her self-doubt. It wasn't just conversation, it was the kind of dialogue that drew two souls together, exposing layers beneath the surface. As they shared vulnerabilities, she felt cracks forming in her own walls. It was liberating, cathartic even, to experience this connection. Days turned into weeks, and their friendship flourished like spring flowers breaking through the snow. They became regulars at the coffee shop below their building, talking late into the night, planning future projects, trading stories about their childhoods and aspirations as if they were painting a canvas of trust. One rainy evening, after a meeting filled with endless stress, Sara found herself staring at the window, lost in thought. She felt the weight of the world pressing down on her once more, the insecurities creeping back into her mind. Navigating people was exhausting, and sometimes she second-guessed her own worth. Then she remembered James and how far they'd come from that awkward moment by the elevator. Just as if he had sensed her thoughts, James called her that night. Sure, she asked, a bubble of excitement rising in her stomach. Absolutely, but let's also make it a work date. They met the next day, and as they sat there, immersed in caffeine and creativity, Sara felt lighter. The cafe was buzzing, filled with chatter and laughter, yet it felt like they were in a world of their own. With each passing moment, she grew more confident. James showed her his sketches, lines that danced across the page in jagged sweeps and smooth curves. He asked, biting his lip, seeking her opinion. She leaned in closer, excitement fluttering in her chest. They're amazing, his eyes lit up. Their synergy crackled bright and alive, and with every idea they bounced off one another, it felt as if their understanding grew exponentially. It was in these moments that Sara realized how important it was to lift each other up. The echo of their laughter blended with the warm aroma of coffee, creating a comforting cocoon in the chaos of life. But beneath that joy, shadows crept in from time to time. Sara found herself struggling against doubt. Did she deserve this light? Were she and James just escaping their own loneliness, or was there something deeper connecting them? One evening, as they walked toward the lift, she stopped him. Sure, he replied, looking slightly concerned. Do you think we're just using each other to feel better? James took a moment, rubbing his chin, searching for the right words. I can see why you'd worry, but I believe we're building something real here. We've both been through our own stuff, and sharing that makes it honest. His honesty struck a chord deep within her, resonating with the thoughts she had kept tucked away. You're right, I get it, he said gently. But let's keep reminding ourselves this is a journey we're on. Despite her fears, a smile broke free, brightening the shadows. It felt like they were both emerging from their separate battles stronger than before. But then came a day that would test that bond, a day when the world turned upside down. Sara received news of a big project at work, and it would require her to deal with a client she had struggled with in the past. The pressure collided with her insecurities and fears. Was she good enough for this? When she told James about it, he sat quietly, absorbing her words. You've got this, Sara, you're talented and you know what you're doing. His encouragement made her heart swell, but she couldn't shake the pang of self-doubt. What if I fail? Then you learn and try again, he replied calmly. I know it sounds cliched, but failure isn't the end, it's part of the path. She felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, realizing that he understood her fears on a level few others did. The sincerity in his voice built a bridge over the chasm of her insecurities, a lifeline she desperately needed. Weeks later, the day of the presentation arrived. She entered the conference room, her heart pounding in her chest. The faces of the clients were all too familiar, men and women who had once scrutinized her work, but through the tension, she could hear James's voice in her mind. As she unveiled her ideas, the room filled with silence. With each word, she showed them her vision, the passion behind every design, every line brought to life. To her surprise, they nodded, some even smiled, tension slowly dissipating. Finally, as the presentation wrapped up, the head of the table leaned forward. This is fresh and innovative. Relief washed over her. She had done it. She had pushed through the fear and emerged victorious. That evening, she called James, her voice bubbling with excitement. I did it, see. His laughter echoed through the phone, infectious and free. I couldn't have done it without you. Silence fell for a moment, then he said softly, well, that's what friends do. In the weeks that followed, both Sara and James continued their journey, navigating hurdles and small victories side by side. Each challenge they faced carved away at their past doubts, building something beautiful and new. Their friendship evolved into something profound, a tapestry woven from shared fears and hope, a bond strengthened through understanding. One night, sitting on the balcony of her apartment, the city lights twinkling like stars in the vast dark, Sara turned to James. He looked out over the skyline, a pensive expression on his face. "It really is, who would have thought, because you asked for help," she mused. "I realized that day how essential connections are." As their laughter mingled with the sounds of the city, she understood that every moment they had shared, every brush-off, every celebration, every piece of advice built a foundation for something meaningful. No longer just neighbors, but allies in the ongoing journey called life, they had transformed from two solitary spirits into a partnership woven with resilience, courage, and care. What had started from a simple request turned into a bond that would carry them through whatever storm life threw their way. Hand in hand, they faced the shadows and found light in each other, more than either had ever anticipated. In that, they discovered the extraordinary power of connection. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft whoosh, the faint echo lingering in the quiet hallway. Sara leaned back against the cool metal, the weight of the day pushing down on her shoulders. She glanced at her phone, fighting the impulse to scroll as she had done 1,000 times before. Just as the elevator lurched upward, she heard a voice behind her. "Hey, can I use the private lift tomorrow?" Turning, she saw James, her neighbor from upstairs. He stood there, a couple of boxes stacked in his arms, his eyes hopeful and serious. For a moment she hesitated. He had always seemed pleasant enough, but they had barely spoken. Who was she to let him use the private lift? "Sorry, I can't let anyone use it tomorrow," she replied hastily, feeling an unease creeping in. James's expression flickered, and for a second she could see disappointment flash across his features. "No problem, just thought I'd ask," he said, forcing a smile. But she could see it didn't quite reach his eyes. The doors opened, and as he stepped out, Sara felt a pang of guilt hit her like a wave. Chastising herself for being so dismissive, she pushed the thought aside, convincing herself it was just a fleeting moment. She had her own life to manage, her own mountains to climb. That night in the half-light of her apartment, guilt found her again. As a graphic designer, it was all too easy to get lost in her work, but she couldn't shake the regret of that moment. Weeks went by and life resumed in its usual rhythm. Sara painted, designed, and delved into projects with a fierce intensity, but every time she caught a glimpse of James in the hallway or heard him moving above her, that moment replayed. Each encounter grew heavier with unspoken words and missed opportunities. One rainy afternoon, while she waited for the elevator, a choice caught her eye, the clipboard hanging beside the call buttons. It was a list of names for the private lift, a document she had glanced at before but never truly looked at. Driven by an impulse she didn't fully understand, she stepped closer, her heart racing. And there it was, James's name, neatly scrawled yet crossed out like a red flag, marking him as someone denied. It poured over her like cold water. He had access, yet somehow felt like he couldn't use it. Suddenly her heart thumped louder in her chest. This had been more than a simple request. It was a reflection of something deeper, something she hadn't seen before. There was so much more to him than she had considered, and her refusal had pushed him into silence. She felt her breath catch in her throat. Had she really been so quick to close the door on someone who probably needed a favor? The guilt surged again, but this time it was urgent. Determined to make amends, she spent days grappling with her decision. As evening fell one day, she took out her mixing bowl, determined to bake cookies, not just any cookies, but chocolate chip, because everyone loved them. Every stir of the batter reminded her of that moment, of the connection she had casually dismissed. When she finally knocked on James's door, she could hear music and muffled voices from within. It raced, but not in fear this time. This was a chance to fix the past, to create a bridge where she had once built a wall. After a few moments that felt like a lifetime, James opened the door and surprise washed over his face. "Sara, I brought you some cookies," she said, awkwardly holding up the plate as if it were a magical artifact. "I wanted to." His eyes lit up. "Wow, thank you." He took the plate from her hands, the warmth of his gratitude lapping at her like a warm tide. They stepped into his apartment, which was a mix of boxes and scattered sketches. "I'm still unpacking," he said, gesturing to the mess, and they shared a laugh that echoed off the walls. As they settled down with the cookies, Sara felt an unexpected ease wash over her. She asked, deliberately reaching into the spaces they hadn't yet explored. "Oh, just a few things from my last place," he replied, his tone shifting slightly serious. "I had to make some changes in my life." That phrase hit her hard. Restart, she knew how that felt, having wrestled with uncertainty in her own career. They talked easily after that, revealing more about their lives and dreams. Each laugh and shared moment felt like a piece of a puzzle falling into place, illuminating shadows she didn't know existed. From that day on, it became a ritual. They met at the coffee shop downstairs and worked on their projects together. It was easy to forget about the long days and lonely evenings as long as he was there, a comforting presence, someone who understood the complexities of life but chose joy amidst them. but shadows lurked even in the light. On one particular day, she mentioned a project that was weighing heavily on her. "I've been working with this client and it just feels like I can't get it right." James leaned forward, his eyes holding hers with a seriousness that made her heart skip. "Hey, everyone faces that. You just have to remember you're talented and sometimes we stumble." "Easier said than done," she muttered, still battling her doubts. "Look," he continued, "every great designer has faced moments like that. It's our failures that sharpen our skills, that teach us. You've worked hard." His words struck her, softening the hard edges of her self-criticism. They worked late into the night on their designs, both finding strength in each other's vulnerability. Weeks passed, and soon the day arrived for her big presentation. As Sara stood in front of the conference table, her heart pounded like a drum. Facing the clients felt like standing on the edge of a high cliff, the open air rushing past her, threatening to pull her down. She glanced over at James, who had insisted on coming for support. Seeing him among the serious faces of the clients brought her a moment of comfort. The first words escaped her lips and the caffeine high she had relied on flickered out, but as she presented her designs, something shifted. She found her rhythm. Each idea unfolded like a flower beneath the sun. Client after client leaned in closer, nodding, connecting with her vision. Finally, the head of the table smiled. "This is fresh, innovative, and you've really captured our needs," they said, the words washing over her like rain on a parched day. Relief flooded through her, coupled with the thrill of victory. After the meeting, she found James waiting in the hallway, eyes wide with excitement. She exclaimed, the exhilaration spilling over, but with every victory, shadows tend to creep back in. As the months passed, Sara found herself grappling with the very thing she had been terrified of: what would happen to their friendship. Did it stem from loneliness, or was it something deeper? One evening, while they sat on the balcony listening to music and basking in the glow of the city lights, she turned to him. "Of course," he replied, a curious smile spreading across his face. "Do you think our friendship is real, or are we just?" Her heart raced as she uttered the words, a weighty silence settling over them. James considered her for a moment before responding. "I think it's real, Sara. We've grown together and sometimes friendships blossom in hard times." His answer struck a chord within her, a melody resonating in the quiet spaces of doubt. "That's fair. I guess a part of me was afraid of losing you," she admitted, feeling vulnerable. "You're not going to lose me," he said, conviction lacing his words. As they made that promise to one another, the foundation of their friendship grew strong-rooted in shared battles and mutual understanding. But life had its way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? One evening, Sara noticed James was quieter, distant in a way she hadn't seen before. They talked about ordinary things, but his laughs didn't ring as true. She asked, picking up the heaviness in the air. He hesitated, then sighed. "I guess I'm just struggling with some things professionally." Honesty in his voice stung deep. "James, you're incredibly talented." He looked down, uncertainty clouding his eyes. She reached out her hand, finding his. "You've got what it takes. Remember what we talked about. Every failure sharpens us." A flicker of warmth danced in his gaze. "Thanks, Sara. That means a lot." From that moment on, they navigated those turbulent waters together. They began pulling each other up when doubts crept in, throwing challenges back and forth like a rushed game of catch. The late-night talks became a haven where dreams and fears intertwined like threads in a tapestry. They spent weekends brainstorming ideas, surrounded by snacks and coffee, laughter echoing through the night like a melody that refused to fade. And then came the day when James received an offer to showcase his work. As he invited Sara to come support him, his eyes sparkled with excitement. "It's a great opportunity." With every passing second, the tension swelled within her as his joy ignited her own fears. Terrified, he admitted, a soft chuckle escaping his lips, "But I'll be okay." "Always," she promised, feeling the knots in her stomach tighten. Weeks later, on the day of the showcase, Sara walked beside him, their energy humming with anticipation. The venue buzzed with excitement, the air felt electric. As he prepared to speak, she sensed his anxiety, but also the determination shining through. Then he stepped onto the stage, the spotlight embracing him, casting away shadows of fear. As he presented his work, each word flew from his lips with confidence, igniting the room. The applause afterward felt like a blanket of warmth, wrapping around them both. Afterward, Sara pulled James aside, their laughter mingling with the sounds of celebration. "You were amazing." He smiled back, an unguarded joy radiating from within. It was moments like these that allowed her to realize how far they had come. They weren't just two individuals crossing paths in their lives, they had become a force, a powerful influence on one another amid the storm of doubt and fear. As they stood there in the soft glow of twilight, a new understanding enveloped them. Relationships don't just build walls, they weave new paths, bridge gaps that once felt unmanageable. Life continued on, days rolling into months, but every moment marked by their unique connection vibrated strongly, their laughter knitting the fabric of a shared existence, rich with inspiration and grounded in empathy. One evening, as they were wrapping up yet another late-night work session, Sara turned to him with a soft expression. "You know, I'm glad I brushed off that request." He chuckled, shaking his head. "It's wild how life works." As they shared that moment, a sense of grounding settled in the air around them. Sara understood now connection doesn't come from proximity, it comes from choice. They both chose to reach out to support one another, and this journey through their lives became something so much more than they had ever dreamt possible. With the allure of countless futures stretched out before them, they embraced the uncertainty, holding on to each other tightly, ready to take on whatever life threw their way. In the end, there was a simple truth. Sometimes a single brush-off ignited the flames of an incredible journey, leading to priceless connections that could carry them through any storm. She didn't think much of it at the time. Standing in the lobby of her high-rise apartment building, Sara turned to see James, her neighbor who had just moved in a few weeks earlier, shifting nervously on his feet. He held a couple of cardboard boxes in his hands, his eyes flickering between her and the private elevator. He asked, a hopeful edge to his voice. She glanced toward the elevator and back at him, irritation surging in her chest. It wasn't just that she didn't want to share the lift, it felt like an invasion of her carefully crafted space. "Sorry, I can't let anyone use it. Hope you understand," she replied, her tone brushing off the importance of his request. His smile faltered as she stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut like a curtain falling after a performance. The guilt that sparked within her was quickly buried under a mound of more pressing thoughts. She had deadlines looming, and the last thing she needed was to complicate her life by getting involved with someone she barely knew. Days turned into weeks, and life continued in its usual rush. Yet every time she passed James in the hallway or heard him shuffling boxes above her, an unsettling feeling crept in. The memory of that moment lingered like a shadow at the corner of her eye. Her heart began to weigh heavy with guilt. One afternoon, while scrolling mindlessly on her phone, she noticed an unusual sound. The elevator dinged, and she stepped inside, only to be interrupted by a nagging feeling to check the clipboard mounted on the wall. It detailed the names of residents allowed to use the private lift. Curiosity pulled her closer, and she squinted at the list. When she saw it, her heart sank. An icy wave of realization washed over her. He had access, yet still hesitated to use it, perhaps out of fear of rejection. Who was she to deny him that? The guilt she had felt before morphed into something sharper, more painful. This was about more than just a lift. She had brushed aside his request, and in doing so had closed the door on a possibility of connection. Determined to reconcile her mistake, she spent the next few days thinking. At night, while working on her projects in the dim light of her apartment, she resolved to bake cookies, a warm, friendly gesture to make up for her earlier coldness. Chocolate chip, the kind everyone loved. The day she decided to present them felt like walking up a mountain. As she approached James's door, her heart raced and nerves danced in her stomach. What if he didn't want to see her? What if he held her rejection against her? She knocked lightly, and after a moment that stretched into eternity, the door opened. James stood there, surprise flickering across his face, holding an unpacked box, his shirt slightly wrinkled. "Hey," he said, smiling genuinely. "Hi, I brought you some cookies," she said, holding out the plate like an offering. His eyebrows arched in surprise but softened into a warm smile. "Wow, thank you." He took the plate, and as he stepped aside for her to enter, Sara felt the tension start to lift. They settled into his small living space, which was a chaotic mixture of cardboard boxes and art supplies scattered across the floor. It was clear he was navigating life as well, just like her. She asked, breaking the ice. James hesitated for a moment, biting his lip. "Well, I recently moved here. Just needed a fresh start, the last place was." Encouraged by his openness, she laid bare her own truths, sharing snippets of her life, the pressures of her design job, and the struggles she faced trying to find her foothold in a field filled with constant competition and self-doubt. With each shared story, their laughter filled the room, echoing against the walls like music. It felt good to be seen, to see someone else right back. The awkward tension from before melted away, replaced by a warmth that hummed between them. After hours of storytelling and cookie eating, the sun began to set, casting a soft glow through the window. Sara realized how refreshing it felt to connect. This wasn't just about moving boxes or elevator access. It was about forging a bond that had previously been stifled by her own walls. Days turned into weeks filled with late-night conversations, collaborative brainstorming, and coffee runs. Their friendship blossomed, nurtured by shared fears and a mutual understanding that encapsulated both of their struggles. But as much as the connection thrived, the specter of doubt would sneak in. One evening, after an exhausting day of work, Sara found herself staring at her computer screen, her mind swirling with insecurities. She asked James one night at the cafe, her fingers tapping uneasily against the table. James paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "I think that's a normal part of life, Sara. Being vulnerable with someone means giving yourself a chance to heal." His words resonated with her, unlocking a door she had kept tightly shut. "You're right," she said, feeling a weight lift slightly. "I guess we both have our own battles, but somehow I don't want this to be just a crutch." James smiled, a look of understanding settling between them. "Let's keep it real then. We have each other and we can grow together, no pretense." Weeks went by, and as the seasons changed outside, their interactions felt like the blooming of spring. They began to act on their dreams, sharing aspirations, pushing each other toward the finish line, and inspiring one another to aim higher. Then came the day of her big project presentation. Sara was a bundle of nerves, unable to escape the feeling that failure lurked just around the corner. Despite putting in endless hours, all she could think about was falling short in front of her peers. Standing in front of the mirror, she recalled James's advice, "Failure teaches us." Taking a deep breath, she pulled herself together, mentally chanting the words as she left her apartment. As she approached the conference room, her heart thundered in her chest. The moment she stepped inside, the room buzzed with conversations and the tension was palpable. But as she looked toward the clients waiting for her presentation, she caught sight of James in the back, his presence anchoring her. Taking a deep breath, she delivered her ideas with passion, pouring her heart into every word. She shared her vision, painted it vividly, and let her enthusiasm punctuate the air. The clients lined in, engaged and interested. Finally, when she finished, the room responded with applause and relief flooded through her veins, merging with a vibrant joy. The clients had responded positively, supporting her vision, and she felt awakened as she accepted their praise. Out in the hallway, James was there waiting, his pride evident as he pulled her into a hug. "You did it," she laughed, overwhelmed with excitement and gratitude. In that moment, she understood that their friendship had transcended just being a distraction from their struggles. It had become a powerful force, driving them both to confront their fears, uplifting each other through the storms of uncertainty. But as summer rolled in, Sara noticed James seemed a bit more distant. It was subtle at first, an occasional stutter in their conversations or a lack of enthusiasm during their late-night brainstorming. When she probed, he would brush it off. Finally, one evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, she mustered her courage. "James, is everything okay? You seem..." He sighed deeply, raking a hand through his hair. "Honestly, I'm trying to figure out my next steps professionally, and it's heavier than I thought." His honesty hung in the air between them, and it felt like an echo of her own insecurities. "It's hard, isn't it? The fear of not living up to expectations, but you're talented, James." He looked at her, his eyes glimmering with a mix of gratitude and despair. "Thanks, Sara, I appreciate that, but some days I feel so lost." "Maybe we could figure it out together," she suggested softly, taking his hand, grounding their shared vulnerability. "We've navigated tough waters before." As they talked deep into the night, Sara felt an old fear creep back in. What would happen if their paths diverged? But as they tackled those conversations, they laid a fortified groundwork for support. Then one day, a big opportunity landed at James's feet. He received an invitation to present his work at an upcoming design expo. Filled with excitement, he turned to Sara, eyes alight with energy. "This is my chance, then let's prepare together," she said, a surge of determination flooding her. They spent late nights brainstorming, sketching, and rehearsing, the energy in the room crackling with creative electricity. As the day approached, Sara felt the tension tightening in her chest. James's success would change everything. The night before the expo, Sara couldn't shake the doubts spiraling in her mind. What if he did so well that he wouldn't need her anymore? The thought gnawed at her like an itch she couldn't scratch, but she shook it off, determined to root for him without reservation. The day of the expo arrived, and as they entered the vibrant venue, the energy of anticipation buzzed in the air. She caught sight of the diverse crowd. The glint of curiosity in their eyes was palpable. When it was time for James to present, he stepped onto the stage with an electric confidence that made Sara's heart swell with pride. She watched him articulate his vision, hands sweeping through the air like a conductor guiding an orchestra, every word striking a chord within her. When the applause rang out, it was like music, and he held the audience's attention with each passing second. The look on his face as he stepped down from the stage revealed the weight of his relief. In the moment of exhilaration, Sara rushed over to him, nearly breathless. "You were incredible. Thank you. I couldn't have done it without your support," he said, the awe shimmering in his eyes. But as the applause faded and reality sunk back in, a quiet fear persisted within her. Now that success had found him, what would their friendship look like? Days turned into weeks, and despite their unwavering connection, the question loomed quietly in the background. They continued to support each other, but each moment felt layered with unspoken words, as if they were both waiting for the other to say something definitive. One evening, when they found themselves sitting quietly on the roof, overlooking the city beneath a blanket of stars, Sara turned to him. "Do you ever think about what happens next?" His expression grew serious as he took a moment to reflect on her question. "Honestly, I've been thinking about it a lot. We've been through so much together. But I fear that success might pull us in different directions," she exclaimed, the rush of emotions bubbling to the surface. "I don't want to lose this." James looked at her, finally meeting her gaze with a fierce intensity. "You mean too much to me for that to happen. We'll figure it out together. Relationships evolve." His words softened the tension between them, illuminating uncharted paths. They embraced the uncertainty, leaning on one another. And in that moment, Sara realized that every brush-off, every awkward moment in the beginning, every shared laugh and tear had forged an extraordinary bond that transcended simple connection. As the chapters of their lives continued to unfold, they walked forward side by side, ready to meet whatever challenges lay ahead together, hand in hand. The unyielding spirit of their friendship had become their lifeline, a testament to the bravery that blooms when two souls join forces amidst the chaos of life. And somewhere deep inside, Sara understood that life is not just about seizing opportunities, but also about holding on to the precious connections that make the journey worthwhile. In those moments of uncertainty, they had found a light that could guide them home together. She didn't think much of it at the time. When the elevator doors opened, Sara stepped inside, ready to escape her long day. Just as the doors began to close, she heard a voice call out, "Hey." She turned to see James, her neighbor from 2 floors up, rushing toward her. He was balancing a stack of boxes in one hand and juggling his phone in the other. He asked, his eyes wide with hope. For a second, she felt a flicker of empathy, but that flicker was quickly swallowed by a wave of annoyance. She had her own life to manage, her own problems. "Sorry, I can't let anyone use it," she replied, her tone dismissive. His face fell, disappointment flashing across his features, but he nodded, forcing a polite smile. As the door slid shut, Sara felt a tight knot form in her stomach. Guilt began to creep in, but she quickly pushed it aside. She had no obligation to help him right. The next morning, a drizzle of rain tapped against her window as she began her day. She sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, but her mind kept circling back to that moment in the elevator. Creating a barrier between herself and someone else felt like a betrayal of the community spirit she had cherished when she first moved in. But the thought was fleeting. Life moved forward, and so did she. The elevator ride became a distant memory, overshadowed by deadlines and presentations that loomed larger than life. Weeks passed, and each time she crossed paths with James, the guilt resurfaced. Maybe it was his overly polite nod or the way he shifted his boxes, revealing fleeting glimpses of vulnerability. It dug at her heart like a thorn she couldn't remove. One rainy afternoon, as she waited for the elevator yet again, the tug of curiosity caught her eye. The clipboard first seemed unremarkable, but today was different. She stepped closer and read the names listed for private lift access. The mundane words blurred, then became clearer. There it was, James's name, bold yet crossed out with authority as if he had been marked for something greater than simple permission. Permission denied, the message struck her like a punch to the gut. He was blocked from something he rightfully had access to. How could she have brushed him off so easily? That feeling morphed into something sharper, more painful regret. Wave of urgency swept over her. This wasn't just about a lift, it was about connection, opportunity, and the humanity they often leave at the door in our busy lives. Over the next few evenings, Sara found herself baking. She poured her feelings into the dough, kneading her guilt into cookie shapes, letting the chocolate chips melt just right. Maybe this will mend things, she thought. She finally decided she would take some cookies over to him, hoping to open a conversation that had been unintentionally shut. Evening felt electric with possibility as she approached his door, her heart thumping in her chest. When she knocked, she felt a surge of adrenaline. What if he didn't want to see her? What if he was still holding that rejection against her? After a moment that stretched endlessly, the door creaked open, revealing James. He looked surprisingly disheveled, his hair a bit messy and his shirt wrinkled. But when his eyes met hers, something shifted. A spark ignited a warmth that filled the air. "Sara." "I brought you some cookies," she said, extending the plate as if it were a truce. His surprise morphed into a genuine smile that lit up his face. "Wow, thank you, that's really thoughtful of you," he said, accepting the plate. As they moved into his apartment, she noticed the chaos of unpacked boxes and scattered sketches that represented snippets of his life. It felt oddly comforting, a reminder that they were both navigating their own storms. Sara asked, her curiosity piqued. He chuckled a little, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, it's overwhelming. I loved my last place, but it was time for a change. I needed to step away from." That single word resonated with her. Drama, she knew it all too well from her own life. With every passing moment, they began to share stories, each laugh peeling back layers of awkwardness, revealing shared dreams and lost hopes. Through their conversation, Sara discovered a side of James she had never seen. His passion for design mirrored hers, but it was mixed with layers of vulnerability and fear that echoed deeply in her own heart. Days turned into weeks filled with laughter, brainstorming sessions, and collaborative cups of coffee. Each encounter felt more comfortable, like two puzzle pieces finally clicking together. The guilt that had gnawed at her began to fade, replaced by something richer and deeper. But along with the joy blossoming between them, shadows lingered. One night, with moonlight spilling across their workspace, she found herself feeling anxious again. She asked, hesitating before bringing it up. James paused, his brow furrowing as he considered her words. "I get that fear. But I like to think friendships evolve in times of uncertainty." His words felt like a balm to her insecurities. "Then let's keep it real," he said, a promise sparkling in his eyes. No pretenses. The more they dug into their vulnerabilities, the more they both felt intertwined in a way they hadn't anticipated. Not long after, Sara found herself in a pivotal moment, a significant project that would bring her career to the next level. When the news hit, she was on cloud 9. But soon the pressure settled in like a heavy cloud. This was her chance, but what if she failed? As the presentation loomed, anxiety wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. During dinner one evening, she confessed her fears to James. "What if I bomb this?" James leaned back, his expression serious. "Everyone fails at some point. It's all part of the learning curve. Remember that failure is just a stepping stone." His steady voice grounded her, easing the chaotic swirl in her mind. The reassurance helped, and she began to focus on her strengths rather than her fears. As the date of the presentation approached, the nerves stung, but in a strangely exciting way. Sara spent countless hours perfecting her work, each minute filled with heart and sweat. And every night, James was there, ready to cheer her on, helping her rehearse, laugh, and release her worries. When the day finally arrived, she stood in front of the conference room, her heart thundering like war drums. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. The room buzzed with chatter, everything a blur, save for the focused glint in the eyes of the clients. James was seated in the back, his encouragement a warm glow that settled her nerves, a lighthouse guiding her through the storm. With every idea she presented, she grew bolder, her passion spilling over like ink from a pen. End of her presentation, the applause erupted like fireworks, filling her with dizzying joy. It felt surreal, she had done it. When she left the room, James was there waiting, his smile wide and bright. He said, pulling her into a tight hug, "I can't believe I pulled it off," she laughed, the rush of victory flooding through her. Over the following months, their friendship deepened, rooted in mutual support. They became each other's anchors, intertwining their lives with laughter, creativity, and compassion. Yet as autumn rolled in, doubt began to creep back. James had been quieter, almost introspective, his excitement dimming as he struggled to navigate his own path. During one evening spent working together, she noticed the shadows beneath his eyes. Sara asked, concern weaving through her voice. "Honestly, I'm just feeling lost," he admitted. "The city feels overwhelming, and creatively, I'm stuck." Her heart broke for him. "You're a talented designer, James." He looked at her, appreciation shining through his vulnerability. "Thank you for being here. Well, we should lighten it up, let's brainstorm together." In those moments, they dove deep into creativity, helping each other push boundaries, seeking excitement in the unknown. Their friendship took on new colors and textures, a vivid tapestry woven from their experiences. But once again, the universe had other plans. James received an unexpected opportunity to showcase his work at a prestigious design expo. When he told Sara, excitement flared in his voice, but it was tinged with anxiety. "Let's prepare together, you're going to blow them away," she declared, eager to help him conquer those fears. Through late-night brainstorming sessions filled with snacks and laughter, they put together concepts that felt electric, molding ideas like clay. Tension danced in the air, a mixture of excitement and nerves as the day of the expo approached. But the night before, unease settled over Sara. She feared that this success might pull them apart. She couldn't shake the thought of losing him to the very world they had fought so hard to navigate together. As they chatted, her voice trembled slightly. James looked her in the eyes, steady as a rock. "No matter what happens, we've built something real." His words grounded her, soothing the chaos swirling within. But as he stepped onto that stage the next day, she still felt that familiar pang of fear. He presented with passion, each word igniting something inside her as she watched him shine. The audience was enraptured, clapping and cheering as he finished. As he came off the stage, his joy was palpable, a bright light bursting into the room. He exclaimed, disbelief mingling with excitement. She replied, enveloping him in a warm hug. In that moment, Sara realized how much they had influenced each other, how their lives interwove beautifully like strands of a greater tapestry. But the echoes of success brought new challenges. The more James gained recognition, the more Sara felt the distance creeping in. It wasn't that he wasn't present, it was as if they were both standing at the precipices of their own achievements, uncertain of how to venture forward without losing the connection they had forged. They often spoke about their dreams and ambitions, but still, an unspoken concern loomed over them. So one evening, sitting under a sky awash with stars, Sara decided it was time to confront the elephant in the room. He turned to her, the look in his eyes serious. "I don't want to lose you either, but we also have to grow." His words rang clear, a promise of continuity amidst uncertainty. In that moment, the air between them transformed, now buoyed by commitment, not fear. Through late nights of work, laughter, struggles, and triumphs, Sara made one thing clear. Their relationship didn't have to follow a prescribed path. They could carve out a journey that honored their individual growth while fostering an extraordinary connection. In the months that followed, they learned to navigate the complexities of success together, each lifting the other up in moments of doubt. They embraced challenges that came their way, building their futures on the steadfast bond they had developed through shared struggles. And as seasons continued to change, one thing remained constant, the understanding that no matter the ups and downs, they would always find their way back to each other. Together, they forged a life imbued with meaning, joy, and love, a testament to the strength found in unexpected connections. Eventually, it didn't matter that she had brushed off his request that day in the elevator. What mattered was how they had transformed that moment into something so beautifully profound, a friendship that bore the weight of dreams, fears, and the promise of a brighter future. Every step they took together was a reminder that in a world where uncertainty loomed large, there was always room for connection if we only dared to act on it. The elevator doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and Sara stepped into the cramped space, lost in her thoughts as she stared at the faded numbers above the doors. She pressed the button for her floor, ready to retreat to the solace of her apartment after a long day. Just as the doors began to close, a voice broke through her reverie. "Hey, could I use the private lift tomorrow?" It was James, her neighbor from 2 floors up, balancing a couple of cardboard boxes in his arms. His eyes looked hopeful, almost vulnerable. For a split second, she felt a twinge of empathy, but the weight of her own frustrations brushed it aside. "No, I'm sorry. I can't let anyone use it," she said, feeling a sense of authority in her refusal. James's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of disappointment that stung Sara's heart, but she quickly shook off the guilt and stepped farther back, sealing herself off from any lingering feelings. The doors closed and she felt relieved, but that feeling didn't last long. That evening, as she sank into her couch with a glass of wine, the weight of her decision settled on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. She hadn't thought much about it during the elevator ride, but as she replayed the moment in her mind, the guilt nagged at her. Why hadn't she helped him? He seemed nice enough, just a guy trying to settle into a new place, yet she had brushed him off as if he were just another inconvenience in her busy life. Days turned into weeks, and life continued in its usual whirlwind. Late nights shifted into a blend of design projects and deadlines that blurred together. As her work consumed her, she often passed by James in the hall. Each time their interactions were quick, full of awkward nods and polite smiles. But there was an unspoken tension hanging in the air, a weighty reminder of that elevator moment. One rainy afternoon, while waiting for the elevator, Sara noticed the clipboard mounted next to the lift buttons. In a moment of curiosity, she leaned in closer to read it. It was a log of names, a list of residents who had special access to the private lift. Her heart skipped a beat when she spotted it. Realization hit her like a ton of bricks. He had been denied access, yet he still had the right to use it, and here she was turning him away. Suddenly, the guilt came rushing back, but this time it was sharper, more profound. She felt exposed, as if she had been holding a mirror up and now saw herself clearly. Rejection hadn't just affected him, it had twisted something inside her too. Her decision had pushed him away, denied him an opportunity for connection. It was more than just a lift, it represented a chance to reach out. Determined to rectify her mistake, she spent several evenings in the kitchen baking cookies. Each scoop of dough was mixed with measured thoughts of how to reach out to James, not merely to say sorry, but to forge a connection she had unwittingly obstructed. As the warm aroma filled her apartment, she pictured his surprised expression. What if he didn't want to engage? What if he held her initial rejection against her? Battling her self-doubt, she placed the cookies onto a cute plate and made her way upstairs, her heart pounding with every step. As she approached his door, she could hear music playing softly inside. She raised her hand and knocked. It felt like a lifetime before he answered, and when he did, the look of surprise on his face was mixed with warm recognition. "Hey," he said, a hint of confusion in his voice. "Hi, I brought you some cookies," she said, holding the plate out as though presenting a peace offering. His expression shifted from surprise to genuine gratitude. "Wow, thank you, that's really nice of you," he said, accepting the plate. As he stepped back to let her in, a warmth enveloped them both. Inside, his apartment was a chaotic blend of boxes and scattered drawings, an artist's haven caught in a state of disarray. James scratched his head awkwardly as he glanced around. "Looks like you're in the thick of it," she said with a smile, feeling the tension release just a little. "I am," he chuckled. "I probably should have asked for help moving." Encouraged, Sara replied, "Well, I know a bit about moving chaos." They began talking, and as the conversation flowed, each shared story peeled back layers of themselves. Sara discovered that James was not just an artist. He was a designer trying to break into the industry, but felt weighed down by the expectations he had set for himself. The more he spoke, the more she realized how similar they were, both navigating a turbulent world filled with uncertainties. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they found themselves leaning closer, their laughter filling the spacious yet cluttered apartment. What started as an awkward exchange morphed into a camaraderie that felt surprisingly effortless. Days turned into weeks, and their friendship blossomed. They met more often, finding excuses to spend time together. Coffee runs, late-night design sessions, and walks in the nearby park became their routine. Each interaction revealed more laughter and understanding. It felt good to connect, to find a kindred spirit in the hustle of life, but with that joy came uncertainty. One evening, as they sat on his balcony with mugs of steaming hot chocolate, Sara found herself questioning everything. She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James looked thoughtful, the glow from the city lights reflecting off his face. "Sometimes, but I feel like it's more than that. We're both growing together, and it's okay to lean on someone when things get tough." His words resonated deeply within her. With every simple truth he spoke, Sara felt her walls begin to crumble. "You're right, I guess." They agreed to nurture their friendship openly, to explore what lay ahead with honesty and courage. With each meeting, the bond deepened, and the walls she had built slowly faded. She discovered that vulnerability could lead to bright horizons so long as two people were willing to be open. But just as quickly as their friendship blossomed, shadows began to loom on the horizon. As James faced setbacks in his career, doubt crept in and she could see it manifesting through his art. He had a piece he was proud of but lacked the confidence to show it to anyone. "Just let me see it," Sara encouraged one day. He hesitated, biting his lip, and the moment stretched, filled with unprocessed fears. "I know, but what if they don't like it? Art is personal. That's what makes it meaningful," she replied, reaching out to touch his hand gently. As he unveiled the piece, a rush of colors and emotions filled the canvas. It was a magnificent portrayal of strength and vulnerability, and it took her breath away. "See, this is stunning. You have to show this to people," she insisted, her voice filled with admiration. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw the flicker of uncertainty still there. "I'm not sure I can," he admitted, voice trembling. She pressed gently, wanting him to see what she saw. "It's terrifying," he replied, the uncertainty radiating off him in waves. "Then they miss out, but what if they do?" The silence that followed felt electric, and she saw the gears turning in his mind. "Maybe," he murmured, almost hesitantly. Little did he know that it wasn't just about the art, it was about them pushing each other to face their fears. They both had transformations ahead, and they had to climb through the doubts standing in their way. Weeks passed, and Sara began to feel the pressure of her own deadlines looming. As she buried herself in projects, she noticed how their meetings felt more tense, weighed down by the looming unspoken fears and doubts. She was frustrated, and as she stared at her screen late one night, it hit her she masked her struggles well, but they were both grappling with insecurities and expectations. Finally, she decided it was time to confront the tension. One evening, she invited James over for a casual dinner, seeking to restore the warmth that had brought them so close. As they sat on the couch eating takeout, she spoke up. "James, I've noticed a shift. It feels like we're both holding back from each other lately." He looked down, clearly taken aback, as emotions seemed to flood his heart. "I guess I've just been feeling insecure," he admitted, his voice strained. "About my art, about everything." Sara felt a wave of empathy wash over her as his vulnerability sank in. "I get that," she said softly. "You don't have to carry that alone. I'm in a similar boat." He met her gaze, uncertainty etched on his face, yet there was a flicker of hope. "Absolutely, together we're stronger." As they spoke, the weight began to lift. The moment felt raw, like a blossoming flower breaking through the earth. They both agreed to recommit to their friendship, to support each other through their struggles. In the following weeks, they faced their insecurities together. Taking the first steps to share James's art and tackle Sara's mounting projects became a shared journey. Each time they recorded a video, presented a piece, or spoke their minds, they rediscovered the joy that comes from mutual support. Then one day, just as the world felt bright and hopeful, James received an incredible opportunity, a chance to showcase his work at a renowned exhibition. He exclaimed in disbelief, the joy radiating from him like sunlight. Sara's heart swelled with pride. "You did it, I knew you could." As the opening night approached, the tension swelled for both of them. James prepared to showcase his art, while Sara wrestled with her own fears of inadequacy. Ever the cheerleader, she encouraged him, reminding him that success was theirs to grasp. Finally, the night arrived. They stood together outside the exhibition hall, a buzz of excitement and nerves swirling around them. They could feel the energy, a rush filled with the unspoken words that had been shared between them. James looked at her, his expression vulnerable yet determined. "Absolutely," she said, squeezing his hand for support. As they entered the bustling hall, the lights illuminated the artwork, and James's pieces shimmered like jewels. The audience moved through the displays, captivated, and she felt the weight of the moment settle over them like a warm embrace. As patrons engaged with his art, admiration rippled through the room. James watched the reactions unfold, and for the first time, doubt began to fade. The applause that followed felt electrifying, a powerful acknowledgement of his talent. Afterward, they stepped away from the crowd, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. "I can't believe that just happened," James laughed, relief washing over him like a tidal wave. Sara grinned, her heart swelling with pride. "You did it." In that moment, the struggle, the fears, and all the hard work spiraled into something beautiful. It wasn't just about his art, it was their journey, their friendship, and how far they had come together. Weeks turned into months, and as winter gave way to spring, their bond continued to grow. They faced challenges head-on, each step marked by laughter and shared experiences. They had woven a tapestry of support, resilience, and trust that yielded more than they had ever imagined. One quiet night, as they settled on the balcony, looking out at the vibrant city, she turned to him. "You know, you taught me to open up." James met her gaze, his smile warm. "Thank you for pushing me to share my art." They both reveled in the moment of quiet, understanding that they had forged something beautiful from an initial act of indifference. Life had a way of woven paths intricately, revealing the connections they had forged through seemingly simple moments. As they watched the stars twinkle above, Sara realized that every seemingly small choice could lead to something extraordinary. Behind that simple elevator ride and that brushed-off request lay the beginning of an incredible journey of friendship that had blossomed against the odds, illuminating the power of vulnerability and connection. They had gone from strangers to allies, weaving a story together made of resilience, trust, and mutual belief. In that moment, they both knew that the world was a richer place for allowing connections to flourish, and sometimes all it takes is a single request to change everything. It happened in an instant, a fleeting moment that changed everything. Sara stood by the elevator in her upscale apartment building, juggling her work bag and a giant coffee cup. She was lost in her thoughts, mentally preparing for the long day ahead. Just then, the door slid open, and there he was, James, her quiet neighbor from 2 floors up, balancing a couple of cardboard boxes. "Hey, could I use the private lift tomorrow? I need to move some things in," he asked, hope flickering in his eyes. In an instant, Sara felt a rush of annoyance. The last thing she wanted was to complicate her already bustling schedule. "Sorry, I can't let anyone use it," she replied, her tone sharper than she intended. As the doors closed, she quickly shifted her gaze, dismissing his look of disappointment. A wave of guilt washed over her, but she brushed it off as the elevator ascended. Who was she to feel bad? She had her own life, her own problems. The day dragged on, filled with meetings and deadlines that loomed over her like dark clouds. Yet every time she crossed paths with James in the hallway, the memory of their interaction nagged at her. It felt disconcerting to know she had been so quick to turn him away. Why did she feel that way? Weeks turned into a blur, with deadlines blurring the lines of her sanity. But something kept pulling at her, a tugging reminder of that moment in the elevator. She had returned home one night, exhausted, when she heard him upstairs, shuffling boxes, his presence a quiet hum in the background. One rainy afternoon, while waiting for the elevator again, her eyes fell on a clipboard next to the lift. It was a list of names, a documentation of residents allowed to use the private lift. Intrigued by a sudden impulse, she stepped closer to read it, every heartbeat echoing in her ears. There it was, James's name. The rush of emotions was overwhelming. He had access rights, yet still he had hesitated to ask. How could she have brushed him off so easily? Panic surged through her, leaving her breathless. She felt sick. It wasn't just about the lift. It was about genuine human connection and compassion, things she had been too wrapped up in her own life to give. Determined to make it right, Sara spent the next few nights baking cookies, stirring her guilt into warm chocolate chip dough. Each scoop of cookie batter felt like a step toward redemption. What if he didn't want to accept them? What if he was still upset about her rejection? When the cookies were finally baked, their delicious aroma filled her apartment. Heart pounding with anticipation, she approached his door, hand trembling slightly as she knocked. The seconds stretched into eternity before the door opened. There stood James, looking slightly disheveled but genuinely surprised. "Sara, hi, I brought you some cookies," she said, holding out the plate as though presenting a rare treasure. His eyes widened, the disappointment flickering away like a candle in the wind. Wow. As she stepped inside, she noticed the chaos of his living room, cardboard boxes piled high, sketches and art supplies scattered across the floor. "Looks like you're in the middle of a move," she commented, trying to lighten the atmosphere. "Yeah, it's a process," he said with a chuckle. "I thought moving would feel easier, but it's more stacked than I imagined." She laughed, and in that moment something clicked. Their conversation flowed easily, each word peeling back layers of their guarded selves. Sara learned that James had moved away from his old life, one filled with complications that had forced him to start anew. And somehow she realized he understood what she felt too. The more they talked, the more comfortable they grew. What began as an awkward apology shifted into genuine camaraderie, and soon they were sharing laughter and dreams long into the evening. As the days rolled by, their friendship took on a beautiful rhythm. Met for coffee, collaborated on projects, and exchanged stories late into the night. Each interaction felt like adding another thread to a tapestry, weaving together their lives. But even as their connection blossomed, shadows loomed, anxiety and self-doubt crept in like ghosts in the corners of their minds. One day, as they worked together, Sara found herself confiding. James paused, his expression thoughtful. "Honestly, sometimes, but I think it's okay to lean on each other while figuring things out." His words struck a chord. Sara felt as if she had been holding her breath, and now she could finally exhale. With their assurance of support, they committed to tackling both their fears and goals together, pledging to keep each other accountable. Just when everything felt perfect, the universe threw them a curveball. Sara faced a significant project at work that could make or break her career. The pressure began to mount, twisting into a vice around her heart. As the project deadline loomed closer, anxiety bubbled over and she found herself spiraling. One evening she broke down, revealing her insecurities to James. "What if I fail? This project means everything to me." He listened intently, his eyes searching hers. "You're incredibly talented, Sara. This is just another challenge, and you've faced worse. Remember all those late nights we tackled our fears together." His encouragement pierced through her doubt, injecting a deeper sense of determination within her. In those moments, she realized that their friendship surpassed just being a distraction. It was a partnership grounded in shared experiences and mutual growth. As days shifted into weeks, excitement carried Sara forward, wrapping her in a sense of purpose. She threw herself into her project, pouring every ounce of creativity and passion into it. And through it all, James was right there beside her, offering support and guidance through moments of uncertainty. Finally, the day of her presentation arrived. Standing in front of the conference room, her heart raced like a drum, each beat echoing with anxiety. She glanced at the clients, wide-eyed and expectant, but amidst the flurry of doubt, she caught sight of James standing in the back, offering an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, she launched into her presentation. As she spoke, the weight of her worries faded, replaced by a growing confidence. With each word, she painted a compelling picture, drawing her audience into her vision. She wrapped up with a flourish, her heart pounding in her chest. The applause echoed around the room, and the validation swept over her like a tidal wave. She had done it. As she exited, James was waiting, pride radiating from his smile. He said, pulling her into a warm embrace. In that moment, she understood they were not just friends, they were a force, each lifting the other higher through life's intricate maze. Soon winter drew near, and while their camaraderie was still blooming, Sara couldn't shake the feeling that James was becoming more distant. She noticed little changes, like how his laughter sometimes felt forced or how his gaze drifted when conversations deepened. She asked one evening, concern coding her words. He hesitated before replying. Honestly, I've been feeling kind of lost. Sara felt a pang of empathy as he confessed. You're an incredible talent, James. You have so much to offer. He looked down, frustration etched into his features. I just don't know where to start. In that moment, Sara reached out, gently squeezing his hand. You are not alone in this. We can tackle this together. As they sat talking late into the night, they vowed to push each other toward their dreams, anchoring themselves in the tumultuous waters of uncertainty. Their friendship had become a lifeline, an intricate bond woven with strength and vulnerability. Weeks later, the universe smiled upon James. He finally received an invitation to showcase his work at a design expo, a golden opportunity he had long anticipated. The joy radiated from him, illuminating everything around. I'm terrified but also excited. Sara agreed, her excitement bubbling. Late nights turned into brainstorming sessions filled with energy, creativity, and anticipation. They lived and breathed art, sketching ideas on napkins and bouncing concepts back and forth. Every laugh and every spark of genius deepened their connection. When the day of the expo finally arrived, the thrill of opportunity cascaded around them. Standing outside the bustling venue, Sara felt the electrifying energy in the air. James stood beside her, fingers twitching with nervousness. She asked, wanting to bolster his confidence. Ready as I'll ever be, he replied, a smile breaking through the tension. As they entered the hall, art hung on the walls, people chattered excitedly, and the atmosphere was alive with creativity. When it was time for James to present, he took a deep breath, glancing back at Sara one last time. Her heart raced as she watched him unfold, commanding attention as he showcased his work. The energy in the room shifted, and with every word he spoke, he drew the audience into his passion. Sara could see their reactions, nodding heads, whispers of admiration. It felt surreal. When he finished, the applause roared like thunder, echoing in her chest. She rushed to him, almost breathless. You were incredible. James looked at her, disbelief sparkling in his eyes. At that moment, all their struggles melted away, leaving only the bliss of shared achievement. They had each pushed through fear, using the bond they created to forge brighter futures, but with success came new challenges. As James gained attention and accolades, Sara felt the haunting specter of insecurity creeping in. While she was thrilled for him, a fear tugged at her heart. What would happen if their paths diverged from here? One evening, she gathered her courage. They were sitting on the stairs of her apartment, the city stretching out beneath them, stars twinkling high above, and everything felt heavy. She began, uncertain. Of course, he replied, looking at her intently. What happens once you become successful? The vulnerability in her voice felt tangible. He turned to her, the depth of understanding in his eyes breaking through her fears. I don't want that to happen. You mean too much to me. Building this friendship, this support was never about us drifting apart. A knot in her chest began to loosen. You're right, neither of them had the answers, yet they sat there feeling as if they had danced around each other's fears long enough. Together, they would evolve through the storms and sunshine alike. As the seasons continued to change, they learned to navigate not just their art, but life itself. Every shared experience became a thread in their ever-expanding tapestry. Each milestone, each hurdle was met with encouragement and laughter, solidifying their bond. In the end, what began as a simple request brushed off in passing turned into a beautiful journey, one filled with unexpected connections, tender moments, and the power of empathy. They had created a lifetime's worth of memories in those fleeting exchanges, illustrating that sometimes a small act of kindness could alter the course of someone's life. Sara looked over at James one evening, stars reflecting in his eyes. I'm so glad I brushed off your request. He laughed, light and carefree. Me too. And in that moment, they both realized that life is about connections, about how they pull us together in the exact moments we need them the most. Life would continue to bring challenges, but together they were ready to embrace them, hand in hand, heart to heart. The elevator doors opened with a soft, metallic sigh, revealing the cramped space inside. Sara stepped in, the weight of her workweek bearing down on her shoulders like an unwanted backpack. She quickly pressed the button for her floor and took a deep breath, eager to retreat to the solace of her apartment and the escape of her favorite Netflix series. Just as the doors began to slide shut, a voice called out behind her. She turned and saw James, her neighbor from 2 floors up, balancing a precarious stack of boxes in his arms. The slightly disheveled man had a friendly face, always smiling in passing, but they had hardly exchanged much beyond greetings. He asked, his voice laced with a hint of hope. For a fleeting moment, Sara considered it, but annoyance flared up within her. The lift was a privilege, and she didn't want to deal with the hassle. "Sorry, I can't let anyone use it," she replied briskly, the words leaving her lips before she could catch them. She watched as his expression shifted, disappointment flashing in his eyes, a stark contrast to the usual warmth she had seen just moments before. But she didn't linger on the feeling of guilt. The doors closed, and she quickly dismissed him from her mind, focusing on her own busy life. The next morning, drizzling rain pattered against her window as she brewed a cup of coffee, the morning ritual grounding her in the chaos of her mind. Staring out at the gray skies, her thoughts drifted. Did she take her coldness too far? The more she tried to put it aside, the worse that knot of guilt twisted in her stomach. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that elevator ride hung like a shadow in her mind. Life rushed on, crammed full of deadlines, client meetings, and increasingly complex designs. Yet every time she crossed paths with James, every quick nod or polite smile, her conscience prickled with unease. One rainy afternoon, lost in thought while waiting for the elevator, she couldn't help but notice the list tacked next to the call buttons. She lined in, curiosity piqued. It was a clipboard of sorts, detailing the names of residents permitted to use the private lift. As she scanned the list, her heart dropped when she saw it, James's name, clearly printed but crossed out with thick, bold lines. The words echoed in her mind, heavy and suffocating. Here was a guy who had the right to ask for help, yet she had turned him away without a second thought. The weight of regret hit her like ice water. Suddenly, everything felt different. This was not just about a simple request. It was about connection, about kindness, about humanity. She had brushed him off without understanding his circumstances, without even thinking. Determined to make amends, she decided to bake cookies. Chocolate chip, a classic. She poured her guilt into each scoop of dough, mixing chocolate chips that melted into sweet warmth. Maybe this will help, she thought, picturing his surprised face when she finally reached out. As the cookies cooled, a wave of anxiety surged through her. What if he didn't want to accept them? What if he didn't even want to see her after her earlier rejection? That evening, she stood before his door, her heart racing, hand hovering over the knocker. A massive kernel of fear swelled. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump. Finally, she knocked, the sound echoing like a heartbeat. The seconds felt like hours until the door opened. "Hey," James blinked at her, surprise washing over his face. "Hi, I brought you some cookies," she said, shyly holding out the plate, a small offering. His surprise softened into a genuine smile. Wow. As he stepped aside to let her in, relief flooded through her. Inside, the apartment was a whirlwind of boxes and sketches, an artist's chaos. Papers were strewn across the dining table, and the scent of paint mingled with the aroma of her cookies. Sara felt a sense of comfort radiate from the messy surroundings. She asked, hoping to ease into a conversation that would help them connect. James chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know how it is, it takes longer than expected." There was warmth in his voice, an openness that grew as they spoke. She found herself sharing pieces of her life, her struggles as a graphic designer, the pressures of the creative industry, the loneliness that sometimes weighed heavily on her. In turn, James revealed his own journey of moving to start anew. He talked about why he left his old life behind, the exhaustion of relationships that didn't serve him, and the desire to pursue his passion for design without the shadows of the past. Time melted away as they connected over their shared experiences, laughter filling the room and the space between them. They exchanged ideas, delving deep into what it meant to start fresh, the challenges that came with it, and the unspoken expectations they felt from society. Days turned into weeks filled with laughter, coffee runs, and creative late-night sessions. Their friendship blossomed like a flower breaking through the winter frost, unexpected yet beautiful. Every encounter felt effortless, each conversation a thread weaving them closer together. But even amidst this joy, occasional whispers of doubt flickered in Sara's mind. James paused, his brow furrowing in thought. "Honestly, sometimes, but I think it's okay to lean on one another when things get tough." His words resonated deeply within her, soothing her insecurities. Perhaps it wasn't a distraction, but rather a partnership, two people lifting each other through life's challenges. With this understanding, they made a silent pact to support each other, to work toward their dreams together. But just when everything seemed perfect, life threw them a curveball. Sara was handed a major project at work, one that could make or break her career. The pressure began to mount, twisting her stomach in knots. Early mornings gave way to late nights, and soon anxiety became a constant companion. One evening, feeling overwhelmed by the looming deadlines, she broke down. "What if I fail? This project is everything." James listened, his expression a mix of concern and encouragement. "You're talented, Sarah. This is just another challenge, and you faced worse. Remember all those late nights we tackled our fears together." His unwavering faith in her started to chip away at her doubt, the weight of her worries beginning to lift. In that moment, she realized that their friendship was not just a fleeting connection, it was a lifeline. Days turned into sleepless nights, filled with a cacophony of ideas, sketches, and creative breakthroughs. With every passing moment, Sara poured her heart into her work, and James stood steadfast, offering support, encouragement, and the occasional pep talk that lit a fire inside her. Finally, the day of the presentation arrived, and all of her fears resurfaced. Standing outside the conference room, her heart raced like a runaway train. She could feel the anxiety morphing into a mix of excitement and dread as she glanced at the clients waiting for her inside. But just before she stepped through the door, she spotted James through the glass, giving her a confident nod, his eyes sparkling with belief. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open, ready to seize the opportunity. With every word she spoke, her confidence grew. The presentation unfolded like a beautiful tapestry, and as she shared her vision, she could see the clients leaning forward, engaged and interested. The applause at the end felt like a rush of fresh air, filling her lungs with relief. When she exited, James was waiting for her, his face beaming with pride. "You did it." Her heart swelled with joy, and she couldn't help but grin as they celebrated her success. In that moment, they both understood the power of support, how their friendship had evolved from mere acquaintances to allies in the tumultuous journey of life. But as spring began to awaken and life thrummed with vibrant energy, Sara noticed a change in James. The laughter that once spilled so freely from his lips felt more guarded, and his gaze often drifted into the distance when they spoke. She asked one evening, her concern palpable. He hesitated, the shadows lurking in his eyes hinting at deeper struggles. "Honestly, I'm trying to find my path. Since the expo, things haven't just magically turned around." The admission hit her like a punch to the gut. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "You are incredibly talented." His eyes looked into hers, vulnerability giving way to gratitude. "Thank you. I've been feeling the weight of everyone's expectations, and it's suffocating." "Then we'll do it together," she said with conviction. "We've navigated rough waters before." That night, they laid out their fears and dreams like a colorful mosaic, acknowledging each struggle and building strategies for tackling them. The bond that formed felt stronger than before, a sanctuary crafted from trust and shared burdens. Weeks passed, and one day, James received an astonishing opportunity, a chance to showcase another line of his work at a highly anticipated exhibition. He said, excitement coursing through him. "Wow," Sara exclaimed, but as the days neared the presentation, a familiar anxiety punctuated every moment. James felt the pressure mounting, and so did Sara. They both worried about standing in the shadow of their own expectations, paralyzed by what others might think. One night, while buried in his sketches, James turned to her. "What if I mess this up?" "We all have doubts," Sara replied gently, "but do you remember why you started? It's about your vision, not what others think." He took a deep breath, grateful for her unwavering support. "You're right." As the night of the exhibition arrived, the air crackled with anticipation. Standing outside the venue, the city twinkling around them, Sara felt both the thrill of opportunity and the weight of fear of failure, fear of losing what they had built. She asked, her heart racing. "Ready to be scared," he replied with a faint laugh, but there was a spark of determination behind his words. Inside the venue, lights flashed and crowds gathered, accompanied by the hum of excitement. When it was finally James's turn to take the stage, a wild wave of nerves churned inside him. But just before he stepped forward, he turned back to her, searching for that familiar source of strength. In that moment, Sara nodded, encouraging him silently, and he took the stage, stepping into the spotlight. As he began to present his work, Sara watched, her heart swelling with pride and fear. He commanded attention, each word flowing with a passion that transformed the room. But just as he reached the climax, just as the audience was on the edge of their seats, something strange happened. The lights flickered and an unsettling hush fell over the crowd. Suddenly, the energy shifted, a tension spiraled through the atmosphere. In that singular moment of uncertainty, she felt something inside her snap. What was happening? What would James make of this? As if sensing the shift, his confident facade began to crumble. The fear echoed in his eyes, and she could see him questioning everything he had prepared. Her heart raced. Would he hold up or crumble under the weight of this unexpected pressure? In that pulsating silence, Sara made a decision. She couldn't just watch from the sidelines any longer. She had to support him, to inject that same passion he had poured into his work. With a deep breath, she stood, stepping forward through the crowd as the murmurs grew louder. She shouted, her voice cutting through the confusion. "You've got this." The impact of her words rang through the venue, piercing the tension that had threatened to swallow him whole. James looked at her, the spark returning to his eyes. As his gaze locked onto hers, the confidence washed over him anew. With renewed strength, he continued, and for a moment the world around them faded. She could see the audience leaning in, captivated once again. Together they could conquer this, a partnership intertwined by faith and resilience. But just as the excitement surged, the lights flickered once more, plunging the room into darkness. The air thickened with anxiety as everyone strained to understand what was happening. Sara held her breath, heart racing, the world spinning in uncertainty. Would this be the moment they had both feared, the moment that could shatter everything they had built? As she looked at James, his expression a vivid whirlwind of determination and dread, she realized they were on the edge, not just of failure, but of something monumental, something that might change everything. And the question hung in the air like a storm about to break. Would they rise from this moment, or would the darkness consume them both? The answer loomed just out of reach, a cliffhanger hanging between the gleaming lights of possibility and the encroaching shadows of fear.